The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. They have no speech, they use no words. No sound is heard from them. Yet their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In the heavens, God has pitched a tent for the sun. It is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, like a champion rejoicing to run his course. It rises at one end of the heavens and makes its circuit to the other. Nothing is deprived of its warmth. The law of the Lord is perfect, refreshing the soul. The statutes of the Lord are trustworthy, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, giving joy to the heart. The commands of the Lord are radiant, giving light to the eyes. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The decrees of the Lord are firm, and all of them are righteous. They are more precious than gold, than much pure gold. They are sweeter than honey from the honeycomb. By them your servant is warned. In keeping them there is great reward. But who can discern their own errors? Forgive my hidden faults. Keep your servant also from willful sins. May they not rule over me. Then I will be blameless, innocent of great transgression. May these words of my mouth and this meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight, Lord, my rock and my Redeemer.
All right. Well, welcome to the Epilogue. Boy, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? I'm very grateful that you're on it with me, that you've been on it. Hopefully you haven't just skipped just here from the very beginning, but you've watched the whole thing. And hopefully you've learned a lot too. It's certainly been an adventure for me to put all this information together for you and to present to you, again, a narrative that I personally haven't seen on anybody talking about biblical cosmology. Because we have to tie it back into the Bible and ultimately the prophetic scheme of things. Because if there's a deception in the world, then it has to do with the ultimate deception, which is the world marveling after the beast. The crazy thing is that what I've covered for you in the last however many 20 hours or whatever it's been is not even scratching the surface. It's not even scratching the surface of the satanic activity that's been done over the last 2,500 years to deceive people into the ultimate goal of a worldwide system that will honor the beast. It is profound how busy the devil has been with these various threads, not only creating them, but also integrating them into one final satanic masterpiece. But now you have enough to know that you don't live on a ball, that the things you've been told about cosmology have been total deceptions, that every major figure in cosmology has been an occultist, a mystic, very deceived, propped up. And of course, the narrative has always been shaped one direction or another. But more importantly, you also know who is behind the lie and for what purpose. That is really one of the main things I want you to get out of this whole presentation. It's not so much to believe that the earth is flat. Great. That's pretty life-changing. It's a big one. But you also have to go the extra step and realize, well, who is the one that created this lie and for what purpose? Of course, the ultimate person is the devil, but he does so through his agents. And you've seen that by now as we looked at all of the history that we covered. Very important, I am not a flat earther. I do not want you to be a flat earther. This is not a flat earth presentation. I am not part of the flat earth movement. In the next episode, we're going to look at 15 problems with the circular flat earth model, and we'll see what the truth is beyond that, beyond the dialectic of it's a ball, no, it's flat, it's a ball, no, it's flat. What is the truth here? Because this is a dialectic. And as usual, it seems the enemy controls both sides. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to, but we're going to explore the mystery together. And I think it's going to be very fascinating. So hopefully you tune in, because again, just like this one, I haven't seen the next episode I'm going to do that. I haven't seen anybody, one person has talked about this, maybe two, about what is the actual truth that we're living on. Not too many people talk about it. A lot of people are caught up in the circular flat earth debate versus the ball, but they don't realize that the earth cannot be a circle. It's not. And I'll prove that to you next time. However many questions that seems to bring up. And of course, there are many, as in, how do we have continuity? Which, of course, the answer is supernatural. And we'll look at that next time. But for today, I want you to realize that Satan and the occult have influenced science much more than people realize. Science is good, but the devil and the enemy have infiltrated it, like they have with everything else, to use it for their agenda. Heliocentrism is a grand conspiracy, and it's a grand conspiracy that spanned thousands of years to ultimately end in the ultimate result, which is the devil being worshipped as God. It is also a powerful spiritual belief system, and it's not based at all on science. As you can see, in the last 2,500 years of history, all the major figures of heliocentrism were occultists and mystics. Heliocentrism can never, at any point in time in history, and we looked quite thoroughly, never at any point in time in history can heliocentrism ever be divorced from the occult, because it is occult. It's part of the mystery religion. It's worship of the sun, which is really worshiping Satan. And it's one of the threads that the devil created long ago to ultimately bring the world into obedience under him. And God has allowed it so that the wicked will be deceived and destroyed. Thank God that it's not going to be for a long time. So yes, the devil will be worshipped. Yes, the papal power will come back into power, but it's not going to be a long time. And that we can be grateful for. Thank goodness. Because Jesus says, otherwise nobody would be left alive if the days had not been cut short. So they have been cut short. But that thread of the mystery religion got integrated into the Catholic Church, obviously because Satan in the church age picked the Catholic Church as his locus, as his foci, basically the center of operation. And because of the Counter-Reformation and the Jesuits in response to the Reformation, the Catholic Church has now subsumed the cosmological thread. Like all things, like the charismatic thread, like the political thread, the state thread, everything is being slowly subsumed back into the Catholic Church, where the devil has centered his power. But either way, the point is to destroy biblical truth and to destroy people's connection to the Bible as the inerrant word of God, and to bring in this false cosmology that has certain problems with it that only the beast can solve. By being the mediator, by giving the voice of reason to climate change and AI, and by telling people what is actually the voice, the thing with eternity, talking about eternity and consciousness. So the beast is telling you all these things and telling you what is left and right. Today we're seeing the final pieces of that thread come together. And if you want to protest Rome, you have to remember that you have to protest everything of Rome. You can't just protest one or two things. You have to protest everything, folks. And that takes courage. It really does take courage. The original reformers lost the Reformation immediately, before it even got started, because at the Council of Trent, they were rebuked for keeping Sunday. The Catholic Church said, look, if you want to protest our traditions, then the only biblical thing for you to do is to keep Saturday, like the Jews, because it's the seventh day. You're keeping Sunday, therefore you refute yourselves because you believe tradition is above the Bible. And so they lost, and they were condemned, and the rest is history. So the Reformers could not let go of Sunday rest. They couldn't let go of the institutionalized religion and the hierarchy and all the poisons and the comforts of Rome. They couldn't let go of the immortality of the soul. They couldn't eventually let go of cosmology because the Protestants initially were skeptical, remember? With Luther and, what's his name? Calvin. I'm sure other ones too. Nobody's going to think that the earth is moving. But eventually, with some Jesuit infiltration, some, science-y type of things, some new inventions, some propaganda, pretty soon everybody believed Roman cosmology. So people today, Protestants, quote unquote, believe Roman cosmology. They believe Roman eschatology thanks to all the three Jesuits like Francisco Ribera, Manuel Lacunza, and Robert Bellarmine, who I talk about quite a bit in my series. But because of them, you have Darby and Irving and Schofield and all of these dispensational things that happened and charismatic things that happened that today is manifesting as the NAR. And I talk about that quite a bit in my Great Delusion series. So you can see the history of how that evolved. But if you believe in a future millennial reign of Christ, 1,000 years, if you believe the Jews have to build a third temple, you believe Roman Catholic eschatology. And the purpose of Roman Catholic eschatology is to make your attention go either to the right or to the left. Either be a preterist, which was created by Luis, what's his name? Jesuit named Luis something. I forget his name now. But anyway, Jesuit made preterism. And Jesuits also made futurism. Now, futurism was before the Jesuits. It was a historically traditional thing for a lot of the church fathers to believe that there was a future millennial reign of Christ, meaning they read Revelation 20 literally. That, you can't blame them. I don't blame them for that. I can see why they made that error. But nevertheless, they didn't believe in the Jews building a third temple. They didn't believe in the Jews getting their own promised land back. They didn't believe in all of this other stuff that came with it, a rapture, dispensations, all this kind of stuff. This was developed much later. So the Jesuits hijacked futurism, turned it into a Jewish-focused idea, and took the attention off the mother church. Meanwhile, this was all happening in the 1700s, 1800s, especially, while all the cosmology stuff was taken off too, because guess what? You can't, if you know Rome is the Antichrist power on the earth, that the devil literally gave his throne to, and Rome is telling you that this is what's happening with the planets and the Jesuits are so involved in the sciences, you would not be accepting Rome's version of cosmology. So you need to change eschatology too. Do you see how these two things are related? Rome had to change eschatology so that everything else, all of its other poisons, could be accepted because Rome is just here to help. Rome is not the Antichrist power on the earth. But of course, if you know the truth about eschatology, then it opens up the door to all of these other lies and seeing their connections to Rome. But this is the thing, folks. Sunday rest, institutionalized religion, immortality of the soul, cosmology, eschatology. Salvation is another one through Arminius and Arminianism and synergism, basically. That's Rome's view of salvation is you have to do something. Now, the Protestants rejected the sacramental system. They rejected the sacraments, that you have to do things to continually basically purge yourself and, atone for your sins because Christ atoned for you. But they didn't reject the fundamental philosophical foundation of the sacramental system. Do you see the problem? They didn't reject the fundamental philosophy that makes the sacramental system even possible. The sacramental system is not the problem. It is a symptom of the problem. The sacramental system is just a manifestation of the underlying forbidden fruit of you must do something in order to achieve the outcome. God's up there and certainly he's doing stuff, but at the end of the day, if you don't do it, then it's not going to happen, or you might lose your salvation. This is Roman Catholic salvation. Of course, it's not salvation, but it's the counterfeit gospel, which is the Arminian free will salvation gospel, that you have some part to play in terms of the outcome. We do have a part to play. We are here to participate. God has brought us here to live and experience and participate. There are over 1,800 imperatives in the New Testament, i.e., do something. And yet, if you don't understand the mystery of how those imperatives are framed within the overall framework of a predestined plan for God's glory that is intimate, meaning he predestined you to live and to be and to come into existence and to get to know Jesus Christ so that you could worship him forever. That was predestined. If indeed you have faith in Christ, that's been predestined. And also, yes, you have to run the race, love your neighbor, do all these things. You have to do those things. But the mystery of life is that when you do them and then you look back on them, it was actually God that was doing them through you. This is a profound mystery. It's the dance of life, folks. But Rome's version is you have to do it. The onus of responsibility is on you. Jesus is great and all, but his death is just a coupon. It's you that has to take the coupon to God and say, okay, sign me up. Whereas the Bible says that you are dead and that Jesus went to the bottom of the river, picked you up, put your dead body on the shore, gave you CPR, and resurrected you. And as a result, you're never looking back. You're never going back in that river because you're walking with him. This is the true salvation. So all of these ways that I just listed off, you have to protest if you want to be independent of Rome. Otherwise, you're not. You're really not, because you're believing Roman Catholic ideas. Sunday rest, institutionalized religion, immortality of the soul, cosmology, eschatology, and salvation. All of these points are being worked simultaneously in the world to bring the world back to the Mother Church. In this presentation, we've looked at one of them, which is cosmology. And hopefully you see how really they're all related. Because climate change, which needs cosmology, being deceived, people need to be deceived on cosmology in order to accept the idea that climate change is happening. They also need to be deceived on the sovereignty of God. Do you see how these two things are connected? In order for people to be emotionally manipulated into accepting the solution of whatever Rome is going to provide for climate change, they need to be deceived on the ball, that well, we're on a ball, we're in the middle of space, we need to save our planet. And they need to be deceived that a sovereign God doesn't exist. Because if you believe in climate change, that it's up to you, you need to do something, otherwise we're going to destroy this world, and God gave us this world and he's going to let us destroy it. Where the Bible tells you that the only person destroying the world is God. God is going to come back and create the world anew after he judges everything. And the heavens and earth are going to burn. However that's going to play out, I don't know. But the point is, God is the only one authorized and powerful enough to destroy the world if there's going to be a destruction. You're not going to destroy the world with nukes, with climate change, with cow farts, with anything else. You are going to live in God's predetermined plan that reveals his glory, and things are going to get worse. Then devil's going to be worshipped, and then Jesus is going to return, judge the world, and eternity will be from that point onward. And if you have faith, then you can thank God for that faith, and you will live with Christ forever. That is not going to be delayed. That's not going to be rushed. That's going to happen exactly when it's supposed to happen. But if you believe that, then all these little tugs at you, come on, you got to do something. Oh my gosh, pollution's getting worse. Look, it's getting warmer. Gravity, Mars is tugging on Earth. We're getting warmer, so climate change is changing. So we need to do something. All these little tugs by the beast, by the snake, tugging at you, tugging with little hooks in your skin. Come on, move over here. Move to the left. No, move to the right. These are things that are designed to tug at you, to go off balance. And you say, no, you're not doing anything. It's like trying to hook something made of metal because your armor is on. Your armor is on, and you see and you hear rightly. And none of these things can fool you because you're not a synergist. I believe in a sovereign God who has preordained everything for his glory. So if indeed the climate is changing, then it just fulfills Bible prophecy that there's going to be signs in the sky, the sun is going to be scorching people at the end with the bowls, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I believe the Bible is sovereign and the events are coming to pass. I don't believe that we did something suddenly and now the earth is going to be destroyed, so then we need to do something more, i.e. align with Rome and listen to Rome for what we need to do and unite the world into one earth citizen friendship, fratelli tutti mentality, and the rest, as they say, is history. So this is the problem, folks. All these things are intertwined. Cosmology, salvation, immortality of the soul. People have visions of, people above the earth. Their ancestors are taking them up the globe earth and they're giving them these visions, or, the what do you call them? The Pleiadians, or, the various interdimensional beings. This is all just fairy tales. It's all fairy tales. And it's all coming into one satanic tapestry, which is really, truly profound. So I've created an in-depth series on all of these, minus salvation at the time of this video. The point is, look, if you want to walk a narrow road, you need to reject all of these things. Rome is the mother of abominations. In order for you to walk the narrow road, you need to reject all the abominations. Otherwise, she's going to have room in your armor to go, hook, gotcha. So you need to cover yourself with armor over all of these abominations. Otherwise, they will get to you one way or another, either directly or indirectly through the people around you. And this is the point. It's very important that we remember that science is a gift from God. He's the one who gave us our analytical minds. And these are a gift. They should be embraced, and we should rejoice in math, in science, in experiments. I love doing experiments. I think having an experimental mind is one of the most fun things to do. Like I said, when I was growing mushrooms, oyster mushrooms, that was so much fun. I felt like I was a kid again, back in chemistry class in junior high, doing experiments. I don't know if you enjoyed that or not, but for me, those things were so much fun. And not so much even the analytical work, but just like watching stuff change and grow. And we live in a very supernatural universe that nothing can ever replace the fascination and the joy of seeing life blossom or the rules of the universe coming into observation. When you're doing a chemistry experiment or something, it's so fun and so cool. And I think that is by design, because these things reveal the glory of God. So they are good. Science is good. But the truth is that we're at the end of time. And again, if you are deceived on eschatology by Rome, you will not have the same sense of urgency. Most people think the best is yet to come, when in fact the Bible tells you the worst is yet to come, until Jesus returns, of course. But science has been infiltrated. And instead of using science to glorify and discover God's work and give God glory, Satan has infiltrated it and used it to create a false religion, a false model of the universe, and ultimately to hide God so that he can present himself as the authority, as the Antichrist. It also hides the fall of man and puts away the idea that, we're totally depraved and hopeless and we need a savior, by presenting to you things like evolution and transhumanism. Remember, even in the old days with what's his name, Erasmus Darwin, transhumanism didn't begin 20 years ago, folks, with the internet. Transhumanism began a long time ago. It began in the garden in Genesis 3. But it had evolution over time, right? And so with Erasmus Darwin, he was telling you about, we were talking about transhumanist stuff, like synthetic life and all kinds of things that then the author of Frankenstein latched onto, and she built her novel and so on. That influenced other things. So this Antichrist spirit idea that man can become like God and evolve into something better has been around since the very beginning. So the cosmological model is designed to give authority and strength to all these things, to give life to things that aren't real. The old science also was very atheistic, and now the new science is very quantum, new agey, transhumanist, to be like God, and ultimately to unite religion and science once more. So that is actually happening as we speak. And of course, the moral authority over that will be Rome. Today, people worship science, and scientists are very much like priests and bishops, mediators, right, between you and the truth. And people like Neil deGrasse Tyson are viewed as these prophets, essentially. And whatever Neil says, oh my gosh, it must be true. And it's just nonsense. They're just charlatans. They're paid actors that are very charming and charismatic, and people swallow it up because they've lost all discernment. Even if they're not biblically based, they have no critical thinking skills. And the ones that do think they have critical thinking skills, they're deceived by the indoctrination. Again, like my friends, and I'm sure you have friends like this too, that are specialists in physics and engineering that are so specialized, unfortunately, that they have expertise bias to where they don't see outside of their little box. Well, no, the math model says this. Well, hold on a second. What if math can be used to misrepresent reality? You ever consider that? What if I can show you experimental proof that you can take a table and turn it into a ball with math, and the math works out, yet it's not accurately representing reality? What would you do? Well, you would question your model at that point, but most people don't. Unfortunately, Rome is going to merge science and spirituality all into one cultural paradigm. We know that. How it's all going to shape out, who knows? You got to keep your thumb on the pulse, and you have to know the direction of history. That's my goal with this presentation, and all my presentations really, is to give you principles Enough details so you see the pattern, but principles on how to keep your thumb on history, because that's what really matters, folks. All this stuff is going to be meaningless. And in 10, 20 years, whenever it is when Jesus returns and we're in eternity, we're not going to be arguing about flat earth and the ball earth anymore. NASA's not going to be even a thing. So this is just here to, again, point you to the truth, which is the ultimate destination of history, that all roads lead to Rome. And so when other things happen, like the charismatic movement, like building the third temple in the Middle East and so on and so forth, that you realize that these things are false signs and wonders coming to pass by all power and signs and wonders of Satan. And they are going to deceive the world into a common reality. But Rome is reining them in one at a time. Astronomy, climate change, AI, all of them coming just one at a time. The Pope this year, I think we read that article, this was this year, 2024, when he had that conference. I don't know if the Pope was there, but anyway, the Jesuits are there for sure. The conference on eternity, what the Vatican has to say about eternity and the cosmos. And what also happened this year was the Pope was, for the first time, invited, I think, to the G7 conference, where he gave a lecture on AI, the responsible use of AI. So you see, the Vatican is reining all of these threads in. Climate change is becoming moral through the Pope's Fratelli Tutti and what is it, the other one? Laudato Si, the basically ecumenical climate change gospel that he put forward a couple years ago. Then he's talking about AI. Now they're talking about eternity in the cosmos. So all these threads are being integrated back to Rome, one at a time. And of course, it's going pretty quick because they don't have that much time left. But that's the thing. And all of the technological marvels that we have are also designed to bring the world under the beast. All these marvels, your phone, I always think to myself, I'm walking, I'm like, man, if I showed this to like David, the psalmist, and King David, or Moses, or Noah, they would look at me and they'd think this was sorcery. Imagine telling Paul, like, hey, I can literally like call somebody, I can talk to somebody who is 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away, and their image appears in my hand, and I'm communicating with them in real time, and they see a vision of me in their hand. That's sorcery, folks. That is by all definition sorcery. Just because it's called technology and we call it a cell phone and it's got all of these, it's got a microchip and it's got this and that. No, this is sorcery. Now, God has used this sorcery for the good in the sense that he's been able to, for the elect and for his purposes, to magnify his glory and spread the gospel. But nevertheless, this is sorcery. And this is exactly the kind of false signs and wonders that are used to bring the world into the beast. Now you need your phone for everything. You're dead without your phone. Everything required, even when I'm shopping online now, I have to put in my phone number in order to verify myself. Like, what? Are you kidding me? Since when? And of course, they send you a little text so they know exactly where you are when you bought it. I mean, it's nonsense, but this is the point. This is sorcery, and it's false signs and wonders designed to ultimately enforce the buy no sell rule that the Bible warns you about. So all of these are channeled. They're given to them. If you've learned how all these people do their thing, just like Einstein, how he was channeling his ideas, these people are in communion with the devil, folks. One way or another, whether they're secret society members or mystics or whatever else, they are puppets of Satan. If people knew the truth behind their beliefs, we're talking cosmology now, but I guess really anything, but specifically cosmology, they wouldn't worship science like they do. They would question and they would do their own science in return. They would realize that the Bible is true, and as a result, that Jesus is true, and that they would come back to God and believe the gospel. The whole world system, as it exists right now, with all of its lies and smoke and mirrors, would come crumbling down immediately if people learned that the Bible is true about cosmology. That is a nightmare scenario for Satan. And so that's why this particular lie is so heavily invested in, and why everybody's ridiculing people who believe in a biblical cosmology left and right. Like that Barack Obama speech where like, oh, this is not a meeting of the Flat Earth Society. Like just constant jabs at the idea that, oh, well, you believe biblical cosmology. Well, you must be an idiot. What were you born like 1,000 years ago? It's nonsense. But of course, they don't want you to believe it, because if you do, then all the lies come crumbling down. Again, the globe is needed for climate change, overpopulation, meteor alien invasion propaganda, science fiction industry, evolution, transhumanism, money laundering with all the space organizations and now private companies that are getting so much money, banking off all these things, etc., etc. Do the math. This is why it's one of the biggest conspiracies there is, and it's, of course, the foundation of many, many schemes. So I hope you've learned a lot in this presentation. I hope also that you'll share it with others to help them out of the deception. Don't be afraid of what other people think of you. Don't be shy. Don't feel ashamed. Truth fears no investigation. And hopefully, I provided you with more than enough evidence to see the truth. Do your best to stand for the truth and let God do the rest. Now, let's do a review of this entire presentation, just for the sake of completion and having everything kind of in one spot. In ancient times, we covered from about 600 BC to about 900 AD. We looked at the Greeks and how they were some of the first, where basically Satan began inverting the cosmology through people like Pythagoras. Pythagoras had his own cult and secret society, and there were many people influenced after him, like Eratosthenes. And as empires were conquered, Satan had to constantly migrate the secret knowledge and the occult from one place to another because everything had an expiration date. Eventually, the knowledge came back to Rome. Rome became the seat of the occult, but it went through many iterations in the Islamic world because they also cross-pollinated with the Indian world. And so the Gnosticism and the occult really went through all these different worlds, and eventually it settled in Rome, but these other places were still hanging on to it as well. So Rome was, again, the seat of the occult power, but that doesn't mean these places went back to biblical cosmology. They were shaped by it, and today Muslims, I don't know what the large majority of Muslims believe, whether they believe the Quran or they believe later Muslim mystics who basically changed Muslim astronomy, but either way, it shaped those places forever, meaning once Rome began to actualize its power, then all those other places that the devil had started would be ready for accepting the Roman cosmology and the Roman authority, really, over cosmology. But anyway, the point is that at no point in any of this was there ever a true scientist, like some empirical scientist. All of these people were philosophers, occultists, or mysticists. Hermes Trismegistus, who was a very mysterious type of counterfeit of Melchizedek, priest and king type of figure, very antichrist, very much against Christ and in place of Christ simultaneously. This figure is all over heliocentric history. And a lot of these people from ancient to modern really read Hermes' writings and used his ideas and basically worshipped Hermes as a god, as the messenger of the gods. Now, we skipped to the Reformation, the Enlightenment, which is around 1500s to about 1700s. And one reason we did that was because Rome had no reason to weaponize its cosmology. It really didn't, up until the Reformation. Rome was completely dominant in Europe. It ruled with an iron fist. It had no reason to weaponize occult knowledge because it enjoyed total sovereignty. So that changed with a lot of things, with the Ottoman Empire, with the printing of the Bibles, the Reformation. All these things were loosening Rome's grip over the world. And so the Jesuits were created. The Jesuits were the psyop / military wing of the Vatican. Well, of course, the Vatican didn't exist until 1929, but of Rome, of the papacy. And they also engaged in learning against learning, which is the strategy basically to create counter-narratives and to infiltrate and to create an echo chamber, which is exactly what you live in today. They infiltrated the Protestants. They created theaters across Europe. They began shaping culture with science and contributions, quote unquote. And of course, the original reformers were aware that cosmology was changing, and they rebuked these changes as nonsense. But through things like the Copernicus and Galileo affairs, where basically we looked at how these things were staged. They were totally staged. They were PR stunts designed to bring the debate of heliocentrism to the forefront, so that Catholics and Protestants could argue and debate. And meanwhile, the Jesuits are infiltrating the Protestants from behind and getting into their denominations with spies and creating the echo chamber and then creating, theaters and productions and et cetera, and secret societies. And eventually, everybody believes Roman cosmology. And then 200 years later, Rome finally accepts Copernicus's teachings. And it seems like Rome has finally seen the light. So, of course, why did they do that? They did that because they wanted to infiltrate the Protestants so that by the time Rome accepted the cosmology, which, of course, Rome was the seat of the occult. They had that cosmology since the beginning. But by the time Rome publicly accepted it, now the whole world was ready for that. And anybody who would continue to protest would look like an outsider and you'd be ridiculed. And there would also be a precedent to say, oh, look, don't be like this antiquated Rome, which took it 200 years to accept science. So it created a dialectic between fundamentalism and science, quote unquote science, but it's really not. What it really is doing is demonizing people who hold to the Bible, i.e. fundamentalists, versus people that embrace Rome's science, which is not science, it's actually occultism. So it's very, very clever, but either way, that's what happened. And eventually, when the Protestants and the world had a majority acceptance, the church came along and made it seem like, oh, we finally accept these things, which of course is not true. They've always had that cosmology. We looked at even like Alexander VI papal apartment. He had, these paintings of Osiris and Hermes Trismegistus in his apartment. I mean, come on. And that's just one pope. How many of them did all sorts of occult things? We also looked at Henry Cavendish, who was another influential figure during this time, and why his experiment was flawed. Of course, everybody brings up Cavendish, but Cavendish is nonsense. It's just a fairy tale you've been told about something that who knows what, if anything, he measured. We looked at many articles, as well as in the most recent section with the current events, that show you that these people have no clue what they're looking at. They really don't. They're constantly changing it and all vacillating on their model. 1 minute, oh, gravity's fluctuation, this. Oh, the other minute, the sun is greater than it used to be. Then it's actually smaller. Oh, actually, we don't need gravity. We don't need mass for gravity. Oh, actually, maybe gravity changes when you go. They have no clue. They have no clue. And people just take it into their minds because it's quantum. So, I guess I just don't understand it. You do understand it. And the reason it doesn't make sense is because it's wrong, not because it's too complicated. It's all just one big conjecture on top of conjectures. They admit it's impossible to measure precisely the constant of gravity, even though it's a constant. They admit there's a huge margin of error. Yet some today are advocating the divorcing of gravity from mass altogether to in favor of dark energy, which again is another conjecture on top of a conjecture. Just like how they misinterpreted redshift. Remember what we talked about with redshift being interpreted as a Doppler effect, being something's moving away, that's why it's changing frequency? What if it's not moving? What if it's just red that's you're seeing and it's not a product of movement? You're assuming that it's moving, and of course Hubble made some serious flaws in his experiments, and he falsified his reports. He presented his data, what's the word I'm looking for? Surreptitiously, he was very dishonestly, right? He presented his data on the Hubble constant, quote unquote constant, very dishonestly. And ever since, no, it's a law, Hubble's law, Big Bang Theory, and everything else, it's expanding. So we have to have, from that model, everything's moving. And so when you're looking out there, well, what's making it move? Well, dark energy is making it move, which is a conjecture. Nobody's ever discovered dark energy. This is all just nonsense, folks. It's one big house of cards. And of course, as a person in physics today, you are completely indoctrinated with this stuff. By the time you even get your doctorate, you're more confused than when you start. And nobody knows left from right. We also looked at Rome's involvement in astronomy and cosmology in the last 500 years, with the Jesuits being named on the moon, the Jesuit craters. The Jesuits were the first to calculate the gravitational constant in quotation marks. Countless lay and clergy Catholic scientists over the last 500 years, the Lucifer telescope debacle in Arizona, which we highlighted. And of course, the Vatican rallying the world's intellect for a common moral vision of the universe, which we just saw this year. Again, if you believe heliocentrism, you believe in Roman cosmology. It's really pagan because that's where it's from, but in this day and age, it's Roman. Now, the next section after that was the 1800s. The 1800s saw a lot of satanic activity exploding out of the French Revolution. Remember, the beast from the bottomless pit comes out, kills the two witnesses, which is the word of God. They die for 3 years. They resurrect. But this beast from the bottomless pit is the beast that the woman rides at the very end, that the kings of the earth give their power to. So that means this system arose from the 1700s with the French Revolution. The French Revolution was a very satanic event. A lot of false light, a lot of debauchery, a lot of evil and murder, and all of the fruits of the devil. And of course, after that, you saw nothing but more of that kind of stuff. 1812, the Jesuits were reinstated. They began waging war on America with infiltration, with secret societies, revolutions, learning against learning. And eventually, by 1872, America was broke after all the fires that happened throughout the country. If you don't know about that, all the major cities were burned down, which is very interesting in itself. And then you had the Civil War, of course, you had presidential assassinations. By 1872, with the Act of 1872, Washington, D.C. was created. Rothschilds took over, and they began doing the bidding of the beast. America has been doing the bidding of the papacy since 1872, for sure. Meanwhile, while all that stuff was happening, eschatology was also being changed through Darby and Schofield by the Jesuits. Dispensationalism, Zionism was being created through Napoleon and other people in Europe, which I talk about in other places. But of course, all these things are integrating into one thing. The devil isn't waging just war in one direction. He's waging war in like 50 directions. And unless you can consistently spot the pattern, you won't see the bigger picture. But we saw a lot of secret societies taking over science in the 1800s. Lunar Society, the Cosmos Club, Skull and Bones was formed in Yale, and many others. And a lot of people were from Yale too, a lot of these people in science. The Smithsonian by James Smithson, who was a Freemason. Charles Darwin and the Darwin family, they were all Freemasons. So do the math. Do the math, folks. All this stuff is occult, and it's controlled by the powers that be. We also saw a lot of spiritual deceptions in the 1800s. Theosophy, the First World Parliament of Religions, which was like an 1890-something ecumenical event of all the worlds coming together. And you had the Satanists there, you had the New Agers there, you had the occults, you had the Catholics, you had the Presbyterians. It's all one love and light. That happened towards the end of the 1800s. You also had false prophets like Joseph Smith, Ellen White, cults like the Sacred Name Movement, Jehovah's Witnesses, massive interest in the occult. See my Great Delusion series, because Darby and Schofield are definitely involved in that one way or another, through Freemasonry, through occult writings. It's all one big club, folks. The 1800s also brought forward 100% proof that the Earth is not spinning through experiments like the Michelson-Morley experiment, Sagnac, Airy, so on and so forth. And of course, as the century wound down, this prompted the enemy to quickly pivot into relativism and bring relativism, which is part of the forbidden fruit. You are the one who determines reality. To bring that to science through people like Einstein. So in the 1900s to present, which is the next section after that, we looked at many scientific figures in physics. Of course, obviously people like Niels Bohr, Albert Einstein, JPL, Tsiolkovsky in the Soviet Union. They're all occultist folks. There's so many we looked at. And what do you see? They're all neck deep in the devil's soup. That's the one thing they all had in common. Whether they were bitter atheists or mystics or secret society members, they all had something in common, is that they were deceived by the devil. And they were being puppeted by the devil for his agenda. Conjectures, or building on top of conjectures through, everybody had some false model, and then the next guy would come in and add to the falsity. To the falseness, is that the word? Anyway, to the fairy tale. Niels Bohr came up with his planetary model of the atom that he pretty much got from the Greeks. And then there was no explanation for how electrons move, because electrons aren't a particle, they're wave. Then Schrödinger came and added his wave equation, said this is actually how things happen. There's no electrons, they're just an electron medium, an electricity medium that oscillates and creates these ionic negative charges. However that works, it's a profound idea to think about, but the point is then quickly people say, oh, okay, well, we must have wave-particle duality then, and so on and so forth. So it's just bad science upon bad science. But the role of the false prophet in the 1900s really came forward, working signs and wonders in the presence of the beast. Space exploration and all of these, things like Universal Studios, Hollywood, and so on, initiated people into the mentality of globalism, into the mentality of earth worship, New Age, transhumanism, climate change, so on and so forth, being a global citizen. All of that was done through the false prophet in the United States. Now, again, the false prophet is not NASA. NASA is part of the false prophet, because other things that the false prophet was doing was exporting the charismatic movement to the world, Jesus revolutions, liberalism, all these things that eventually are going to be common threads into the Roman ideal. Now, after that, we talked about relativity and how it's gaslighting you. Relativity, of course, they say it's the best model that explains the universe. It's really not. Relativity is absolute nonsense. But relativity does something very powerful for the globe, which is that it allows it to be hidden and unfalsified. Because without an objective frame of rest, you can never say for sure, well, is it the earth moving or is it the heavens moving? I don't know which one it is if you don't have an objective frame of reference. Because remember, all those people that we looked at, they said they're equally valid. But that's the point. You know that the earth isn't moving because the Bible tells you, and the Bible is the objective word of God. So we do have an objective frame of reference. And the earth is a reflection of God and the Creator, who is unmoving, unchanging, who is the rock, and so on. So either way, relativity seems very complicated and crazy. And it is, because it's wrong, not because it's something that you're too stupid to get or I'm too stupid. That's what the scientists want us to think, that we're just too stupid to understand it. You just don't get it. It's too complicated. No, relativity is very confusing because it's wrong. It's contradictory. And we looked at that, countless examples of Einstein contradicting himself. He was holding untenable and confusing positions. One minute he's saying one thing, then another minute he's breaking his own principles. And it's just contradictory all the time. People in his day thought that his ideas were science fiction and ridiculous. And yet people today think that, it's the best explanation we have. No, it's not. Not at all. The Bible tells you where you're living. Of course, the Bible is not a cosmological manual, but the Bible tells you the truth. Either way, most of his ideas that he had were taken from people before him, and he just basically plagiarized. He brought relativism to the space and time, meaning that there's no absolute time and there's no absolute frame of rest. That was his gift to mankind, is absolute relativism. And he's propped up as this genius who just figured it out, and he's just this mad scientist in a lab, just isolated from society. He's just figuring all these complex equations, and man, he's so smart. This is the same stuff that you see throughout history. There's always one guy they prop up, and it's the hero. This person, Eratosthenes, measured the circumference of the earth with just sticks, and this other dude he had walking across, and it's just this amazingly brilliant man. When Eratosthenes was the chief librarian of the Library of Alexandria, which was the seat of the occult, by the way, in ancient times. Einstein inverted reality by getting rid of the ether, which is the medium for light and electricity and all these things to basically go through. And he turned it into empty space. And as a result, he had to do something with light, so he turned it from waves to particles. So basically, he inverted everything, which is a trademark of the devil. But in this way, heliocentrism could forever hide behind relativity, making it unfalsifiable. And this is the point. This is why relativity is so in your face with all these science articles, because relativity is needed for the globe to basically hide behind. Because if you have an absolute frame of rest, which they have acknowledged is possible, you can interpret what you see as the heavens moving, not the earth moving. That's a completely valid frame of interpretation, according to all of those physics heads that we looked at. But either way, without an absolute frame of rest, then the globe can always be true, could always be possible. So that's how they hide. But it's wrong for many reasons, and we go into specific reasons why in the videos that we highlighted in this section, so make sure you check that out. And I'll say this again, you do not have to have the perfect understanding for all of these things. You don't. You don't have to understand everything that's in those videos about quantum mechanics or relativity. You just have to see what they did. They inverted the truth. They lied. They made contradictions. They have bad science on top of bad science. The good science that did come up, like Schrodinger's wave equations, they quickly misappropriated to their own model so that they could hijack it. So there's nothing you understand. Stealing, lying, cheating, these are puppets of the devil, folks. Now, the next section was quantum sorcery, and we looked at quantum mechanics and quantum physics, which again, they're all bogus, self-contradictory, and deceptive, just like relativity. So don't feel stupid if you don't get it 100%. It is confusing. It's confusing because it's wrong and it's contradictory. Particles do not behave like waves. And life does not manifest when you put your attention on it. That's nonsense. That's sorcery. That's why it's called quantum sorcery. Again, it all started with Niels Bohr's mystical view of the atom. And basically, they needed conjectures to explain the gross problems. Because if an electron is a particle, then how do you explain the change of, basically states? So with a particle, he explained it by quantum leap. And that, it goes instantly there. Well, how does that work? Well, you have wave particle duality, and you can't measure. There's Heisenberg's uncertainty principle where you can't measure the direction or the momentum or the position of an electron at the same time, which are all based off of particle physics. But particle physics is nonsense for subatomic things. Schrödinger's wave equation describes the atomic level, the atomic world, much more accurately with reality. That's why they use his equations, but yet they haven't let go of particle physics. Because if they do acknowledge Schrödinger's, this is where it all comes back, folks. This is like a house of cards built on top of a house of cards built on top of another house of cards. If they acknowledge Schrödinger's equations as the truth, and that electrons were not particles, but you're looking at a field that's being oscillated, that's creating negative charge, and light is a field, and it's in a medium, in ether. We're back to square one now. Do you see the problem for the enemy? We're back to square one, where you have a medium that's being oscillated to create these phenomena like light and electricity and so on. And what that means is, if there's a medium, then you go back to all the science that was done to prove that medium and to prove that the Earth is stationary. It's the ether that's moving across the Earth. We're back to the same problem. So they have to maintain this backwards way of interpreting the world while forcing wave equations to do the math and filling in the gaps of logic with wave-particle duality or quantum superposition, where something can be in two places at once, or two things can be on top of each other in the same space at the same time, which is total nonsense. This is impossible. That does not work. Waves can do that because waves are not particles. They're not things. Waves can superimpose, and that's what happens when waves interfere with each other, and they create interference patterns where there's constructive and destructive interference. But with particles, it's a particle, man. It's not going to be, there's no such thing as superposition. But they have to come up with these conjectures because they're avoiding the elephant in the room. Do you see the point? If we just said, listen, Schrödinger was right, and this whole quantum view of the micro universe, the atomic universe, is totally wrong. There's no such thing. Einstein was wrong. He inverted reality. Light is not a particle. Electrons are not particles. There's an ether. There's a field. Everything is operating on fields because we live in an electromagnetic universe. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means, well, wait a minute. Let's go back to all those experiments in the 1800s. What were they talking about? You see, this is a major problem. So they can't ever admit the truth. This is what happens when you are a compulsive liar. All you do is you create a new lie, and then you put another one. And when that one expires, you tell another lie, and so on eventually until you can't anymore, because that's the point we're approaching. We're approaching the point where it's going to be so unbearable to deal with all this stuff. And you're just going to just pray to God that the day that you wake up, that's the day that Jesus returns. That's how unbearable it's going to be. But anyway, don't get lost in the nonsense of quantum nonsense. Quantum computers don't exist. They never have existed. They never will exist. They're just random number generators that they're being propped up through propaganda, just like they had with the nuclear arms race and the Cold War, how it was all staged to make people want world peace and to make the dialectic to bring a world union about. This is all just part of the plan. Quantum computing and AI is very much tied together. I haven't seen the papacy talk about quantum computing, but you did see that article where they were talking about Rome's vision of eternity, whatever, through the cosmos, how they integrated the whole quantum thing to it. So quantum computing is not yet reined into the beast, but it is part of AI. And a lot of people are saying we need quantum computers to do all this AI stuff. And of course, the papacy has talked about AI and responsible use of AI. And of course, AI is going to be a big tool in the digital inquisition that's coming to monitor you and to, keep track of everything you're doing so they can enforce the mark. That's what it's all about. That's why they're developing AI in the first place. So I don't know how quantum computing will be threaded into this whole thing, but it will be. Don't worry. The point is that quantum computers don't exist. So whatever comes down the pipeline where you hear quantum this, quantum that, quantum computing this, quantum computing that, quantum supremacy, quantum superposition, whatever, quantum flux, quantum leap, whatever it is, it's all sci-fi nonsense. It's lying to you. And if you want the proofs of that, watch the section again and take notes. But it's all nonsense. It's just there to shape culture towards ultimately the false light, the globalism, transhumanism, union of the world into one religio-political system under the beast. Now, the last two sections were NASA plus current events we looked at. And there's a lot today you can look up on NASA. We just scratched the surface of their trickery. And again, my goal is not to spend everything I do on NASA because that's low-hanging fruit to me. But we did look at some key things, like their track record of the occult and mysticism and the lying that they have in everything that they do. We looked at topics like satellites, gyroscopes, eclipses, the ISS, and we saw the fakery in everyone, and we rebutted it with very plain and simple empirical evidence. We looked at plenty of videos about their psyops, like the Challenger explosion, how they basically killed off, quote unquote, killed off those astronauts to make space look dangerous and make it seem like, oh gosh, we need to do more. Like what they are with that recent article is like, 50 years later, it may be much harder to go to the moon now than it was 50 years ago. Are you kidding me? How can it possibly be harder to go to the moon now after 50 years of innovation in transistors and whatever else in propulsion and lasers and all these things and guidance and math than it was 50 years ago with those rinky-dink cardboard, looking aluminum tinfoil hat, whatever, lunar lander. It's just nonsense. But this is it. People buy it up and they just buy, they're so indoctrinated that they accept whatever is given to them. That's how you know the spell is complete. But we saw, for example, the Saturn V rocket where I don't know how loud the video on that one was, but the bird was flying in the air, and then as soon as it started taking off, it just fell to the ground, basically knocked out, and it got dissolved by the power of the sound. 220 decibels is enormous. 203 is 10,000 jet engines. 10,000 jet engines, 203 decibels. And 220, I don't know what that's equivalent to, but it's an enormous amount. And so there's no way that anybody could be inside that spaceship. They tell you, oh, well, it's in an airtight capsule and they're 350 feet away through all kinds of this and that. Like, really? Come on, man. It's just so nonsense. Even if you get into a void with your spaceship, the free expansion of gases tells you that there is no thrust whatsoever that you can achieve when you are releasing a thrust of any kind in a void. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get anything. You're not going to get any push because you're not pushing off anything if you're in a void. Do you get the problem? So all this stuff about rockets in space and thrusters and this, it's nonsense. They never went to the moon. And if that's the case, what does that mean? That they're willing to go through to such great extents to lie to you. And people like Musk who go on record saying, oh yeah, we went to the moon. Oh no, for sure. 100% we went to the moon. When you either are stupid, you must be really deceived, or you're totally in on it. And if either one is not a good news, if he's stupid and he's really that deceived, then that's really like something for somebody that wealthy and influential to be that deceived. The other side of it is, which I'm much more likely to believe, is that he's completely in on it. He knows, and he's lying to you. He's totally comfortable being a liar on, public TV, lying over and over and over again and being committed to a lie. Not just telling like a little white lie, like, oh, okay, I don't want to deal with press, but really you are committed to this lie. That's a whole nother conversation. And that tells you everything. These people, the devil has them by the neck and they do the devil's bidding. And otherwise they get suicided or they get, whatever else. By the way, we looked at a lot of things like that. We looked at many current events where the deception is still ongoing, where they keep using bad science and conjectures to try to explain a model that has no logic to it. It's all just conjecture and math. And constantly there's things happening that disprove the model, so they have to quickly apologize. No, it's actually this. Well, maybe gravity without mass is a better explanation. I mean, that tells you everything. There's also biblical discoveries like the firmament where it's like electrons are hitting a glass wall, and that kind of thing. Or they've discovered a force field, or they discovered the waters below. And of course they have to frame it in this model of theirs. Or the atmosphere extending beyond the moon. That was my favorite. Now the atmosphere goes around the moon, 600,000 kilometers or whatever. I mean, come on. It's just like, if that's ever a come on man moment, that one definitely is. We also see signs and wonders, like the Apophis, the god of chaos asteroid that everybody's coordinating now to make sure we don't get hit by the asteroid. And of course, the cat video from 30 million miles away. It never ends, folks. It never ends, but it will end when Jesus returns. And that's the good news. That is our hope. And that's why all of this at the end of the day should point you to Christ. I have documented for you probably more than most people would document on this topic, and especially with how we look at the angle of Bible prophecy. The heliocentric conspiracy is real. It is very real, but it's part of the greater conspiracy of Satan being worshipped as God on the earth. And that's what you have to realize, that the Bible warns you that this outcome will happen because God has decreed it to separate those who believe and those who don't. Those who are elect will not take the mark. They will not fall into this system, this great delusion that's going to take over the world through false signs and wonders. Those who are not elect will be deceived. We don't know who those people are, but the point is that after everything's said and done, you look back on this, you say, yeah, there's no way I had any chance if it wasn't for God's Spirit giving me supernatural discernment so that I could be separated and come out of Babylon. If it wasn't for God's Spirit, you would have been deceived. Guaranteed. There's not even a chance against all signs and powers and 100% maximum effort by Satan. No chance. And that's the point. To separate the elect from the non-elect in the final generation, to reveal God's sovereignty over salvation and over all things when he returns. Because if you see the massive power on this earth, and truly it's a marvel, hopefully you've marveled at that, like John marveled at Mystery Babylon. You see the massive power and coordination these people have over containing this narrative over thousands of years. It's truly profound. It really just blows my mind. That's what I love about history, is that when you piece all these pieces together, you can sit back and you're like, wow, what a show. What a show it's been. And what a show it is that we get to be able to look down the corridor of time and put this all together. But nonetheless, it's a marvel. It's a marvel. And when you put it all together, you're like, wow, the devil has been really busy. And there is no way in heck that I would ever have a chance against such a being, such an evil being with so much resource at his disposal and so many agents all over the world. You have no chance, not even a chance, none, zero whatsoever. And that's the point, because that reveals to you that you need a savior, and that if you can see clearly, then God has saved you, and that glorifies him as the savior. And it also gives you peace because you're not going to lose your salvation. Unlike the Arminians and the Catholics and the modern Protestant charismatic movement will have you believe, which of course is Antichrist, because God's plan for his people cannot be foiled. God has chosen to save some people. Obviously, he hasn't chosen to save everybody, but he's chosen to save some people out of history, not the majority of human history, or not the majority of human population, but a good deal of people. I don't know how many, but a lot of people throughout history. He's revealed himself to, he's saved them, and his work cannot be undone. And that's good news. That is the basis for the gospel. If you don't believe that, then you can't have good news. What good news is there if it's you that determines the outcome? So that's why the devil wants you to believe that, to rob you of peace and to rob God of glory. But either way, the greater conspiracy of Satan to rule the world is coming to a head, folks. It's coming to a head in this generation, I believe. Again, if you need edification on that, watch all my series that I mentioned, but don't fear. Instead, rejoice. Rejoice that the end is coming close, that there isn't much time left, and ultimately what that means is the Bible is true, that Jesus is returning soon, and all of this will just be one day a faint figment of our memories, if that. So I hope this presentation has edified you and also armed you to the teeth against the devil's schemes. Well, take care. We'll see you the next time, and God bless.